The storm lashed against me as my father's voice sliced through the night, cold and merciless. "You're no child of mine. Get out." He stood in the doorway, face contorted with rage, convinced I'd stolen $5 million from the family business. My knees hit the soaked earth, mud splattering as I gasped for air, rain mingling with tears. "Dad, I didn't. Please, just listen." My voice cracked, lost beneath a clap of thunder. But there was no mercy. With a calculated sneer, he grabbed the suitcase, already packed, and hurled it into the nearest puddle, water spraying like blood from a fresh wound. The staff watched from the shadows, eyes wide, whispers rising like ghosts from the kitchen window. Before I could crawl toward what little I had left, Nina stepped forward, a predator circling prey. Twisting my mother's wedding ring between her fingers, she sneered, "You don't deserve a damn thing." The ring flew, slicing my skin as it hit. Blood trickled down, lost in the rain. My half-brother was next. Cole, always the first to strike. "Thief!" he spat, his boot driving into my ribs, forcing me back toward the iron gate. Aunt Beth clutched her pearls like they were rosary beads, her voice shrill. "Go die like your mother." With one final shove, Cole sent me stumbling into the storm. The gate slammed shut behind me, sealing their betrayal. I barely registered the cold biting my skin, the rain drowning out my sobs. Crawling to the suitcase, I clawed it open. Ruined clothes, soaked papers, my ID warped. I'd seen the setup coming too late. The forged ledgers, my name scribbled by someone else. Nina had been tightening the noose for years, weaving lies until my father saw only what she wanted. Cole got the business, the house, my mother's memory erased. I don't remember how far I walked that night, just the sound of the streetlights humming above me and the taste of blood in my mouth. By dawn, I'd collapsed beneath a flickering gas station sign, shivering as I traded my last $5 for stale coffee and a donut that tasted like cardboard. I sat on the curb, turning Mom's ring over in my fingers. It was all I had left, and I clung to it like it might anchor me to what little of her remained. Weeks bled together after that. Cheap motel rooms, cracked ceilings, and the stench of mildew. I scrubbed floors at a greasy diner and worked doubles until my hands blistered. The regulars were cruel. Trucker hats, wandering hands, empty wallets. "Smile, sweetheart. You look like hell," one slurred, gripping my arm. I yanked free, jaw tight, while my boss shot me a warning glance. Another night, a woman in faux fur left me a napkin instead of a tip. "Loser" scrawled across it like a final curse. I was starving, bone-deep hunger that gnawed at me until I pressed fists to my stomach just to feel something other than emptiness. And then, one night, just as the world seemed ready to swallow me whole, a rusted sedan pulled up beside me. The window rolled down slow. "You need cash, right?" the man asked, his smile sharp as glass. "Easy job. Move a few packages." My rent was due. I couldn't afford pride anymore, so I got in. He took me to a shadowed alley behind a warehouse, his grin shifting from friendly to feral in seconds. The moment his hand tangled in my hair, yanking me toward the back seat, I knew. "You're gonna earn this the hard way," he sneered, breath reeking of stale cigarettes. Panic hit fast, cold and blinding. My fingers fumbled in my pocket until they found the rusted pocket knife I'd nearly forgotten I had. Desperation took over. I slashed wildly. The blade bit deep into his arm. He roared, blood darkening his sleeve, and in that second of shock, I bolted. I ran until my lungs burned, the gas he'd spilled on my shoulder soaking through my shirt, the stink of it turning my stomach. I didn't stop until I collapsed behind a dumpster, shaking so hard my teeth clattered. Hours passed before I dared move. A week later, I was nursing a flat beer in the seediest dive bar I could find, smelling of grease and regret. That's when Luke appeared, lean, scarred, eyes sharp beneath a battered leather lukete. "You look like hell," he said, lighting a cigarette, his voice rough but not unkind. I stared ahead, too tired for small talk, but he kept going. "World chewed you up, huh?" "Yeah, me too." He used to play big on Wall Street, lost everything in a bad deal, but now he was hunting for someone with nothing left to lose. "Want to get even?" "I know how," he offered, exhaling smoke. "But you need to want it more than they ever wanted to see you crawl." Something about his voice made me pause, so I told him about my father, the bee betrayal, and the frame job. Luke nodded like he'd heard it all before. "Then let's burn 'em down, Hassantan," he said. "Together." We started in the library, hiding behind ancient monitors. Luke taught me the language of money, stock charts, market patterns, and risks no one else dared touch. Night after night, I stayed until my eyes ached, fueled by rage and cheap coffee. Our first trade was a gamble, a dying tech firm no one believed in. I almost pulled out when it tanked. "Hold," Luke growled. "Trust me." 2 weeks later, the company scored a government contract. Stocks soared. We cashed out big. For the first time in months, I smiled. From there, we climbed. A dingy office became our war room. 2 desks, endless screens. We won, we lost, but we learned. When a bad call gutted half our savings, I was ready to walk. Luke shoved coffee into my hands. "You're no quitter, Emma. Not anymore." We risked it all on a failing energy company. I found a loophole, Luke found a buyer, and we flipped it. Tripled our money. That was our turning point. Years blurred. My name sat on the door of a sleek downtown firm. Millions flowed in. Luke remained by my side, the only one who knew the full story. 10 years later, I stood in my glass office, city lights stretching for miles, whiskey warming my hand. "You've come far," Luke said, tossing his lukite down. I glanced at my mother's ring gleaming on my desk. "Not far enough," I murmured. Nina, Cole, Beth, Dad. They thought I was gone, forgotten. "It's time," I said, turning to Luke. He grinned slowly. "Let's make it hurt." We moved fast, no hesitation. I'd bled for this moment. Beth and Cole were first, the architects of my downfall. I'd tracked them for years, followed every deal, every whisper. Now it was my turn, and I wasn't here to forgive. I was here to collect. Beth still lived in that decaying old house, clutching every cent she'd stolen like it might save her. Cole, meanwhile, strutted through the city in tailored suits, parading as CEO of Carter Industries, convinced he'd buried me for good. They'd both forgotten one thing: I never stayed down. I started with Beth. Fear had always ruled her, superstition wrapped tight around her throat. As a child, I remembered her screeching that my mother's ghost would curse me, calling me a bad omen. Now, I made sure she felt that curse for real. I dug up the forged ledgers she'd used to frame me. Luke had a guy who could unearth anything. Slowly, methodically, I sent pieces of those ledgers to her, each one stained with red iron inks. "Your blood will pay." Anonymous calls followed, midnight whispers of "You hear Emma's mother yet?" until she was too terrified to step outside. When she finally called a psychic, desperate for salvation, she had no idea the man she hired was on my payroll. He fed her fears perfectly, convincing her the curse would only break if she cleansed her soul and her bank account. Every dime was straight into a shell company I controlled. When the trap was sprung, I went to see her myself. She opened the door, pale, trembling, already broken. I dropped the forged ledgers onto her table. You taught me survival, Beth, I said coldly. Now you can learn how it feels to live in hell. She crumbled, sobbing, clawing at the air as I walked out. A month later, word spread she'd boarded up the windows, whispering to ghosts that would never leave. One down. Cole was next. Cocky, ruthless, still bleeding the company dry. What he didn't know was that I'd been buying Carter Industries stock through dummy corporations for years. Luke handled the paper trail while I waited, patient as the grave. The opening came at the annual shareholder meeting. I walked in a sharp suit, hair pulled back, and took my seat. Cole didn't even glance my way until the vote. When the chairman called for motions, I stood. I moved to remove Cole Carter as CEO, effective immediately. Silence. Cole's face turned crimson, fist slamming the table. "Who the hell are you?" he roared. I met his eyes without flinching. "I'm the ghost you made," I said, and sat down. The vote passed. Just like that, he was out. But Cole didn't lose quietly. 2 nights later, a black SUV ran me off the road. 2 men in hoods jumped me. One pulled a knife. I fought like hell, slamming my elbow into one's jaw, breaking free, and into the woods. Luke found me an hour later, his truck rumbling on a back road. "It's Cole," he said grimly, handing me a burner phone. He'd traced the hired muscle straight to Cole. We didn't bother with cops. We bought one of the hitmen, paid him double to flip. On video, he spilled everything: names, dates, payment. By sunrise, that footage was everywhere. News outlets, social media, every screen in the city screaming Cole's crimes. By noon, cops dragged Cole out of his mansion in cuffs. Fraud, attempted murder, life, no parole. Before they locked him away, I sent him one last gift, an empty check with a single line scrawled across it: "Welcome to my hell." That night, I sat in my office, whiskey in hand, Luke leaning against the desk. "Beth's a ghost. Cole's done," he said, raising his bottle. I nodded, the city lights blazing below me. 2 down, and for the first time I felt it. The quiet power of revenge served cold. Luke's voice cut through the silence, low but steady. "You good?" His eyes, sharp as ever, searched mine. I didn't answer right away. Jwaway. I arred at the screen where Cole's mugshot flashed beneath bold headlines. "Yeah," I muttered, keeping it short. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Not yet. Nina and my father were still breathing easy, untouched, as if none of this had ever happened. I killed the TV, grabbed my coat, and glanced at Luke. "We're not done." He gave a grim nod, finishing his beer. We stepped into the cold night, the weight of unfinished business pressing heavy between us. 2 left, 2 who thought they'd won. Nina first, the queen who'd orchestrated my ruin like it was a game. Luke dug deep, old files, offshore accounts, paper trails no one was supposed to find. Turns out Nina had been stealing from the company long before she framed me. I leaked everything. Anonymous, calculated. Within days, her name was splashed across every news feed. Fraud, embezzlement. The feds froze her assets. Her mansion hit the auction block, and the socialite circle she adored scattered like rats. But Nina wasn't the type to go down quietly. She hit back hard, filing a lawsuit, spinning a new lie, that I was the mastermind, that I faked it all. She had good lawyers, and suddenly I was in cuffs, dragged from my office with cameras flashing. Luke's voice was the last thing I heard. "Hold on, we'll fix this." But Nina played dirty. Inside, she paid off inmates to finish what she couldn't. The first night, they came. 2 women cornered me, fists flying. "This is from your stepmom, no," one spat, as her knuckles split my lip. I fought back, broke one's nose, but the damage was done. 3 weeks of hell. Bruised, bleeding, never sleeping. But I held on. Luke didn't stop. He found the ace we needed. A recording from years back, Nina drunk, laughing about how she'd cooked the books. We played it in court. Her voice, slurred, smug, hung in the air like a noose tightening. The judge's face hardened. Case dismissed. Nina Sanina Wast. 20 years, no parole. I walked out free. A week later, I visited her in prison. She sat there, hollowed out in orange, still trying to glare me down. I smiled slow and slowly pulled her wedding ring from my pocket, the one she loved more than anything. You said I'd never have anything, I whispered, tossing it through the slot. It clattered at her feet. I have everything now. You rot. She lunged, screaming curses as I walked out, the guard nodding like he'd been waiting for that moment. Last was Dad. I found him in a run-down nursing home, skin sagging, eyes empty. The man who threw me out couldn't even meet my gaze. I'm sorry, he rasped, trying to rise, but his legs gave out. You picked them over me, I said, voice flat. Look where it got you. He crumbled, tears streaking his face as I pulled out a photo, me, him, and Mom, before the lies. I ripped it in half. He flinched, a broken man. But what caught me off guard was the letter, yellowed, tucked in his nightstand, dated a week after that night he'd left me in the rain. Addressed to me. His shaky confession was sent. I stood there, letter trembling in my hands, wondering if regret mattered once the damage was done. Emma. I shouldn't have believed her. The words shook in his frail voice as he stared at the letter in my hand. His eyes brimmed with tears, the guilt carving deep lines into his worn face. Nina must have hidden it, I thought bitterly. His letter, his apology, swallowed by the same woman who'd poisoned everything. Maybe he hadn't been the monster I'd painted him, just a weak man who'd let someone else drive him to ruin. I tried to fix it, he choked out, shoulders trembling. I was too late. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence stretch between us, the weight of everything unsaid, pressing down like a storm cloud. Finally, I dropped the letter in his lap and pulled a check from my coat. $5,000. Enough to keep him breathing a little longer. Take care of yourself, I said, turning for the door. Please, Emma, don't go. His voice cracked behind me, but I didn't stop. Some things couldn't be undone. Luke was already waiting in the lot, leaning against his truck, eyes unreadable. I climbed in without a word. Dad died 3 months later, alone, his obituary barely a whisper in the back pages. That night, Luke and I sat in the dark, bourbon between us, the weight of 10 years finally settling on my chest. Nina was rotting in prison. Dad was gone. The war was over, and I didn't know what the hell came next. We drove back through the city, neon lights blurring past, neither of us speaking. When we got home, I collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling like it might have answers. Luke handed me a beer, his voice quiet. You did it. They're gone. I nodded, taking a slow sip. Then why doesn't it feel better? Weeks passed in a blur. The office hummed like always. Deals closed, contracts signed. But something felt hollow. Luke stuck close, handling numbers and ang out dumb jokes to fill the quiet. One morning, he dragged me out for coffee instead of the usual boardroom grind. We sat in a downtown cafe, steam rising from our cups. You've been quiet, he said, stirring his drink without looking at me. What's next? I shrugged, watching people pass by the window. Figuring that out, I muttered. He leaned back, studying me with those steady eyes. You know you don't have to do it alone, right? His words hung in the air longer than they should have. He'd been there for everything, the dirt, the blood, the rise. Maybe it was time I stopped pretending I didn't need anyone. Life shifted after that. I sold off the old Carter estate after the bank foreclosed, used the money to fund a scholarship for kids like me, ones nobody believed in. It wasn't much, but it felt like breathing again. Luke helped, nights spent knee-deep in paperwork, takeout containers scattered across the floor. One night, sifting through applications, he glanced up. "You're different now," he said, almost surprised, less angry. I smirked, grabbing a slice of pizza. "Maybe I'm just tired." He laughed, shaking his head. "Nah, you're finally living." I didn't argue. Summer rolled in, and Luke talked me into a break. Just us. A cabin by the lake, a creaky porch, wood walls, and a view that stretched forever. We fished off the dock with cheap rods, laughed when mine snapped, and built a fire as the sun sank low. Luke had been quiet all day, poking the flames, fidgeting. Finally, he set the stick down, eyes glowing in the firelight. "Emma," he started, voice low. "I've been meaning to say something." I turned, heart already racing, waiting. Luke rubbed the back of his neck, nervous, vulnerable, in a way I'd never seen. "When I met you in that bar," he began, voice low, "I figured you were just another job, someone I could help get back on their feet." He forced a shaky laugh. "That's how it started, but it didn't stay that way." His eyes lifted, locking on mine, something raw flickering behind them. "I've watched you claw your way out of hell, Emma. You're the strongest damn person I've ever met. But what gets me is that heart of yours, the part you hide from everyone." He hesitated, breath shallow. "Somewhere along the way, I fell for you." My beer froze halfway to my lips. I stared, heart pounding harder than any fight I'd ever walked into. But Luke wasn't done. I kept telling myself it was just the work, just loyalty. But it's not. "I love you, Emma. I want this. For real. For good, if you'll have me." He exhaled like it nearly broke him to say it. I set the bottle down, palms resting on my knees as the words settled like a weight I didn't know how to carry. Love. From Luke, the man who'd dragged me out of back alleys, who'd bled beside me, who'd stayed when the world turned its back. My throat tightened. I'd spent so long surviving on anger, keeping everyone out. But Luke, he was different. He never asked me to be anything but exactly who I was. Maybe I'd felt something too. Something buried so deep I didn't dare name it until now. I glanced up, finding him still waiting, braced for rejection. "You sure are yous?" I asked, voice softer than I meant. He didn't even blink. Dead serious. A laugh slipped from me, small and disbelieving. "You're insane, Luke. But yeah, I'll have you." Relief hit his face like sunlight breaking through clouds. He stood, crossed the fire, and wrapped me in his arms. His lukewarm he against my cheek, his grip solid, grounding. For the first time in what felt like forever, something warm settled deep in my chest. We sat back down, closer now, fingers laced together as the fire crackled between us. "So, what's the plan?" he asked, he grinning. I stared out at the dark water, the stars blinking to life above us. "No plans," I whispered, "no fights. Just us." Luke nodded, leaning back with me, and we watched the sky burn with stars until sleep pulled us under. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of pancakes sizzling. Luke stood at the stove, humming off key. We ate on the porch, the air sharp and clean, laughter slipping easy between us. Later, we hiked through the pines, the trail winding until it opened to a clearing with the lake stretched wide below. I stood there, breathless. "This," I whispered, "this is what I've been missing." Luke slipped an arm around me, his voice steady. "You've got it now." And he was right. The revenge was done. The ghosts were gone. What was left was real. Him. United States. For the first time in my life, I wasn't empty. I was free. I was home.